Alright, today's video presentation is on cellular respiration. Cellular respiration involves energy, so let's look at that for a moment. And we know that all living things have to use energy. And our whole atmosphere and our planet and our universe has a constant amount of energy. We're not creating energy, we're not destroying energy, we're just changing the form at which it comes in. And that's going to be a key principle to understanding cellular respiration, and then the following one is photosynthesis. So let's take a peek at that. So if you look at this picture here, we have the sun coming down giving off some light energy. That can be taken up in plants, and plants then can also take up some carbon dioxide and water, and they make glucose. As a result, they can then take that glucose and break it down to form their own ATP, and that's why we call plants autotrophs, because they can supply their own energy. They are very unique in that way. Now, you are not an autotroph, you're a heterotroph, which means you have to go to another source to get your energy. And just like that bunny rabbit here, the bunny rabbit has to go to the plant and eat the plant, and it has its glucose and then make its own ATP from that. So when we talk about organic molecules and how they're going to be recycled and replenished and changed over our environments, we have to look at the sun is going to provide us with the beginnings to make some organic molecules. Then heterotrophs are going to take those organic molecules, break them down to make ATP, and rearrange to make other molecules. And as you work up the energy food webs, you know that each organism is going to be taking those organic molecules and rearranging them into more organic molecules for their own benefits. So when we look at cellular respiration, we're going to say, what is it for? It is basically for heterotrophs and autotrophs to supply them energy. How does it do that? It's going to break down complex organic molecules, or the food in which they take in, into smaller, simpler molecules. Those molecules then are going to be utilized to release energy so that we can make some ATP. And ATP, if you remember, is a very energy efficient molecule. So what's our formula or equation for cellular respiration? We're going to start first with glucose, which is C6H12O6. And you would get that from your food. And then you're going to breathe in and get your oxygen, and then those are going to be rearranged into carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. So you're taking the energy in these organic molecules, releasing it to form the molecule of ATP. You give off water and carbon dioxide as a waste product when you breathe out. So again, in word form, it's glucose plus oxygen. It's going to yield carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. You need to make sure that you can memorize this formula and know it by heart. Just to refresh your memory as well, this side here is our reactants, in other words, our ingredients. What are we using to make our products on the other end of our arrow here? So glucose and oxygen are our reactants. Carbon dioxide, water, and ATP are our products. Let's take a quick review of ATP. ATP, if you remember, is adenosine triphosphate. It has three parts: the nitrogen base, the sugar, and the three phosphate groups. How are we going to release energy from this molecule? Well, if you remember, we have our triphosphate group over here, and that is indicating your ATP, and one of those is going to be broken off, and as a result of breaking off that, you're going to release an awful lot of energy. So it's going to go from ATP to ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and release a bunch of energy that then will be utilized, for example, to maybe bring something in via active transport into your cells, help your muscle cells contract, help your neurons be able to function so that you can think, read, and participate in this lovely video. So that's ATP. Where does cellular respiration take place? It takes place in your mitochondria. Remember, we just spent some time learning about all the components in our cells, and the mighty mitochondria is where, in the presence of oxygen, that we can break down glucose and make some ATP. What type of organisms go through cellular respiration? Well, plants go through cellular respiration, animals go through cellular respiration, fungi, protists, and yes, some bacteria. And you're saying to yourself, how can a bacteria go through cellular respiration? It doesn't have mitochondria. Because if you remember, bacteria only have cell walls, cell membranes, cytoplasm, ribosomes, and DNA. So they don't have an organelle in the presence of oxygen to break down. So what they do is a very special form of cellular respiration, and that is without oxygen. And it's called anaerobic respiration, But right now, you guys just really have to understand it as a process of fermentation. And there's two types of fermentation, lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation. Lactic acid fermentation is what happens in your muscle cells. So you're working out really hard, breathing in as much oxygen as you can, and you're going through regular cellular respiration producing your ATP. Well, the demand gets so great that there isn't enough oxygen there, so your body will do a secondary chemical equation, which is very similar but without oxygen. And instead of producing lots of ATP, it produces a little bit of ATP and a lot of lactic acid. That lactic acid builds up in your muscles and causing that cramping and that pain. So the other form of fermentation is alcoholic fermentation, and that occurs in mainly yeast cells. And they can live in an environment where there isn't any oxygen, and instead of producing large amounts of ATP, they produce small amounts of ATP, and they also produce some alcohol and carbon dioxide. That's basically the process we use to get alcoholic beverages. So a yeast will be put in a container, given lots of glucose and no oxygen, and it will eat, and as it's eating and breaking down those carbon dioxide, that glucose, it's going to produce carbon dioxide and alcohol. Quite interesting. So cellular respiration can be performed with oxygen and without oxygen. Let's turn our heads now onto photosynthesis. That's a process in middle school that you were probably familiar with, where you're going to take the light energy, carbon dioxide and water, a plant, and you produce oxygen. Well, this year we're going to just kind of expand on that a little bit and give you a little bit more knowledge. And that photosynthesis is a process by which energy is transferred from light energy into organic energy or organic molecules in the form of glucose. What is it for? It's basically for autotrophs, that unique group that can maintain their own energy. And again, here's their chemical equation. It's going to start with carbon dioxide, water, and light, and those are going to be rearranged to create glucose and oxygen. And oxygen is going to be the waste product given off by plants. Again, here's our reactants, carbon dioxide, water, and light, and our products are going to be glucose and oxygen. Where does this take place? It takes place in our chloroplasts, in particular in the chlorophyll, which is a pigment inside. And so if you look at this picture here, we have a nice plant cell. And how would you know it's a plant cell? Well, because it's a square and has lots of little green dots in it. And that's where your chloroplasts are. And inside there is where your chlorophyll is. And it's the green pigment that's going to allow plants to look green and to help us with the process of utilizing that light energy from the sun. What types of organisms produce or go through photosynthesis? And we all know it's plants. You may or may not know it's also algae. Algae you've often seen on a fish tank maybe, or on rocks in a river or stream. And algae can also cover the top of a pond or stream. And yes, bacteria can actually perform a little bit of photosynthesis, because there is some bacteria out there that. So let's look again in a little bit of summary here. We have photosynthesis with our formula. Our reactants are carbon dioxide, water, and light. Our products are oxygen and glucose. It occurs in plants and algae, some bacteria, and it happens in the chloroplasts. So if we look at our diagram, here's our carbon dioxide, our water, and our sunlight. It's going to take place in plants and the chloroplasts. It's going to give off oxygen and glucose. Respiration, on the other hand, is starting with that glucose that was made, the oxygen, and it's going to then take those, rearrange them, and make carbon dioxide, water, and the key ingredient here is the ATP molecule. This can occur in all living things, so that means plants, animals, fungi, protists, and some bacteria. It happens in the mitochondria for most. Every now and then a little bit can happen, like the fermentation process in cytoplasm. And again, if we look at our diagram, we have our glucose molecule and our oxygen. So you're eating and breathing. Take that in and you're going to produce ATP. As a result, you're going to give off carbon dioxide and water. So let's look at it lastly, again, just real simple as far as the ecosystem is concerned. You have the sun that's going to come down on plants, and they're going to draw up carbon dioxide and water, perform photosynthesis. They're going to produce oxygen and glucose. That oxygen and glucose is going to be taken in by another organism, like us, for example, or this elephant here. It's going to eat in the glucose and breathe in the oxygen and perform cellular respiration and produce ATP for all of its processes. Then it's going to give off carbon dioxide and water. The whole process can start all over again. This is a nice biochemical pathway where one process makes what the other process makes. So cellular respiration makes water and carbon dioxide. Plants take that in, convert it into oxygen and glucose, which this organism takes in, produces ATP, releases oxygen and carbon dioxide, and the whole process goes round and round. That's all there is for today. Make sure you memorize those formulas, where the processes take place, and if you have any questions, we'll see you in class. Thanks.